Welcome to episode 189 of the Hunting Party Podcast. I'm Dark Brew from thebrewhall.com and the Brew Hall on Twitter.
And I'm Molly Saunder from the Hunting Party Podcast.
And I'm Kheldul from Hunter DPS.
Today is Saturday, October the 5th, 2013, and if you want to participate in the chat room and have your name read on the air, just create a cool Hunter name like right now and join in on the fun, because we're about to read the names.
And joining us today in the chat room are, I'm going to butcher every single name, Alderana, Banya, Blade Wisp, Cab, Alipide, Hotshot G Hunt, Induats, Ligerwolf, Lynx, Lyriana, Ozander, oh boy, I just screwed that one up, Xander, Premach, Slugslinger, War Vinny, and Zero Miss.
Awesome.
Our lovely moderator, as always, is Alessander. You can send her questions by having a private message by left-clicking her name, selecting PM, and then typing in the new tab. Or you can send your question to huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com.
Right. And, of course, it'll just fall into the nether, though we do have one email today, so yes, it has a chance, a small chance of being read on the show, assuming that there's time. And even though we have an email today, there's no guarantee we'll get to it, although we'll certainly do our level best. And by the way, the reading of the names is always great, and I think we spent months getting some of those names and figuring out how to pronounce them, and I think you probably just set us back by half a year there. Thank you for that. They're not easy, though.
No.
And we like it that way. That's what we say. The more consonants in your name, the better.
Yeah, definitely have every guest host read them. Kind of a trial by fire.
Hotshot G Hunt says that's the second time my name has been pronounced correctly. So that's pretty good because he's here like every week. So I mean, he's probably good for at least 100 episodes of having his name read on the show.
Hey,
so,
I did not read any of the hosts' names.
No,
we
that's
already
right.
did ourselves.
I didn't read my own name. I didn't read your name or Ollie's.
Excellent. Oh, and of course, Arth is not here today. I forget what he's doing. I didn't say he's at a Ren fair today, and he said he might try and chime in here, but I'm not counting on it. I mean, he'll do it through his iPhone or something along those lines. But I assume he's off drinking and I don't know, jousting and whatever you do at those things. Probably
archery,
turkey leg and chomping on that. So good times to be sure. But despite him not being there, we did want to start off with, I guess, an announcement or two. And he continued over at the Warcraft Hunters Union, the Hunter Community Expansion Revamp Project, the HCERP. That name just cracks me up. He did a couple more posts this week for topics number 4 and 5. So he was soliciting feedback on pet tanking, was number 4, and soloing. And then number 5 was button bloat. So when we get him back next week or a couple weeks, we'll be able to give you some results of what kind of feedback he's been getting. But he does have those 2 posts up at the WHU for you guys to go in there and provide your feedback on those 2 topics.
He definitely wants as much feedback as possible. So leave your comments there.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what we'll end up doing with all this other than talking about it here on the podcast. Maybe going over to the official forums and starting a thread there or something to talk about this, but the idea is to definitely planning to provide Blizzard with as much of this feedback as possible and say, hey, look, here's the Hunter class of our dreams, so to speak, and what we would like it to do. So it's a great way to participate there, and there's some really good topics in there that I think some of those you can expect to be addressed with the next expansion too. I would think like button bloat for sure is one, and the other one he had mentioned briefly last week was spec differentiation. I think those 2 would definitely be, I would expect to be kind of high priorities for Hunter changes moving forward.
Yeah, and they've also, there have been blue posts about those 2 items in particular, so there's a lot of chance to get that reflected.
All right, well, that's really it for announcements. We move on to some news here. You want to take this first one here, Cal?
Sure. So the in the raid progression update, Method was the first to get down heroic 25-man garage this week. I guess I should say in the EU and Americas section, because there was a Asia that got it earlier.
Yeah, I think the Asian one was. I thought that was a 10-man kill that they got. I could be wrong about that.
Asia should probably be getting everything earlier because their 10-man and 25-man are not locked to each other, so they can raid twice as much and get twice as many drops.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong here too. My understanding is that the gear level is different between their 10 and 25, meaning their 25-man raids drop higher level gear than their 10-mans, and I think it was noted on MMO Champion that their gear level was a fair bit higher than the gear level that the EU folks and the US folks typically have that are going for these world firsts. And I think it does make a difference to some degree. It's sort of a weird thing. It seems like the Asian realms kind of feel disconnected from the rest of the community here.
For sure, and having twice as many opportunities for drops, even though they may be, some of them may be slightly lesser drops, but also their item level is higher than everybody's around, or at least the U.S. and the EU. So it's a completely different type of ball game. But as I understand it, you're going to have Roger Brown on the podcast.
Yeah, I've reached out to him. He's been on the show a couple of times, and he said he'd be willing to come back and talk about the hunters as far as how they're doing in 5.4, and of course the heroic rating that they've done. So I don't have a date for that yet, but it'll probably be sometime in October, probably not next week, but either the week after that or the week after that. So stay tuned for that. But you had a note that they had actually 2 hunters that took part in their kills, which is good.
It's very good news. You don't want to just have one hunter to be soaking up the drops that only a hunter could use. Because they've got 2, it clearly demonstrates that we have use in the 25-man heroics, which is awesome news.
That is awesome news. So congratulations to Method, and like I said, we'll look forward to seeing Roger Brown, having him back on here soon. The other bit of news, not Hunter related, but this is related to the WoW movie, and they've set a release date. We knew it was coming out in 2015, but now it's going to be coming out December 18th, 2015. So we know exactly when it's going to be released. So, I mean, it's moving forward. It's going to be happening. The only thing we haven't heard anything yet about is any kind of casting. At least I haven't heard any kind of casting news and haven't heard anything about Michelle Morrow being cast for anything as of yet, but that doesn't mean it won't happen or can't happen.
She may not be able to talk about it until it's afterwards. Sometimes that happens as well.
But December, that's an interesting time frame. It's probably not a bad time for them. I mean, December's certainly one of those. The 2 times a year, I guess, where you have the blockbuster releases, and obviously for the summer, starting right around May through really July is when the big blockbusters come out, and then there's that fall season. So December, that's when all the Lord of the Rings movies came out. They were December releases, so that's probably not a bad time frame, especially because 2015 is when the new Star Wars movie is coming out. So it's all that will be over and done with, and they really won't be competing against that for hype and everything else. So I think that's probably a smart time to release their film. So looking forward to that. That'll be weird actually going in there to see that movie, only because of playing the game and being part of doing all this, that they'll feeling a little bit of a connection to it in some way, probably more so than just other movies that come out.
It's going to be a weird experience. Clearly they'll have to make it popular for people that have never played WoW. So hopefully it'll appeal to both the WoW and non-WoW audience.
Yeah, I hope it does that, and I hope they really focus on just telling a good story and making a good movie and not tying it so directly to the game. You know what I mean? I mean,
sure.
An Easter egg or 2, I think, would be fine. And maybe seeing a dwarf or someone, yelling Leroy Jenkins and finding a way to, or many whelps handle it. Those
that was not Hunter. Just for
I
the
know it
record.
wasn't a hunter, but just anyway, someone doing that. If they could fit a couple things like that, yeah, that would be good. But I hope they don't overdo it with that type of thing. That would not be. So anyway, so we're looking forward to that, and hopefully they'll have a hunter in the movie. Gosh, I can't imagine if they. I mean, they have to have some sort of class in Magic. I don't know if they'll have hunters or not. Because it's such a fantasy.
It's only a fantasy trope, though, if it's a human or an elf, especially if it's an elf.
They have to have elves and humans, and there'll be a mage of some kind. There's going to be a mage or a warlock, something. I just a feeling it's going to be so magic focused that I don't know that we'll get the. I hope we get the hunter in there. We got to get the hunter in there.
You got to have the dwarf hunter.
Yeah. We'll wait and see. So I'm sure we'll probably see something at BlizzCon about this and hear more about this then, which is another month out or so. But anyway, why don't we talk about some hunter stuff, because there's no hunter news, but there's a lot going on now. It's 5.4 is in its fourth week here, just about, and we're learning a lot more about the gear now and how hunters are performing. And you've had a chance, I think, to look at some of the tier 16 set bonuses and the trinkets and things. So let's talk about that for a little bit.
Okay. Well, I've been extremely lucky on loot, I would say. So I've gotten maybe too lucky, because each time I get something that's an upgrade, I then immediately upgrade it with the the Valor.
Right.
And I've been Valor depleted for a while because I upgrade and then I get a new drop, from Flex, and then I get a new drop from Normal that replaces it. It's looking the gift horse in the mouth type of thing. But so I've just got the 2-piece, which I think is becoming fairly common these days.
I'm hoping it's not too hard to get. I've got one piece of tier gear, the chest piece out of Flex, and that's all I've seen drop at this point. I've been doing Flex every week that has come out. I really like the Flex rating, and of course I've been trying to do LFRs. I haven't done my LFRs this week yet, but hopefully I'll get one piece of tier out of there. But I've been getting drops like you, but I've been getting stuff that I need, but I haven't really been getting the stuff that I want. And it's sort of, it's like, okay, yeah, I needed the bracers. That's good. A belt is good, but really could have used the ranged weapon or the trinket. So I haven't seen a whiff of the assurance of consequence, which everybody and their brother seems to have at this point. I'm going to assume that you have it at this point.
Yeah, I got it Wednesday. I also got a Warforged ranged weapon, normal, on Wednesday too.
Oh, very nice. So what's the item level on that? Those are
upgraded. That's 567.
Okay, yeah. So because what's normally it's 553 is in the normal. That's the eye level of the normal gear. So you can upgrade. Most people upgrade that to 561. So you're up 567, which is very nice. That's got to be. I don't know what heroic level is, but it's got to be approaching that level at this point a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty clse. So anyway, I've got the 2-piece, which has been very interesting to work with. First of all, for people that may not know, the 2-piece set bonus for hunters reduces the cooldown of rapid fire, but it does it differently for specs. So if you're Beastmaster, it reduces the cooldown every time you fire an arcane shot or a multi-shot. It reduces the cooldown of rapid fire by 4 seconds. If you are marksman or SV, survival, it reduces the cooldown by 8 seconds each time you fire an arcane shot or multi-shot. So no longer is the case where you hit rapid fire kind of at the beginning of a fight, and then you know when you're going to hit it again. You kind of have a certain pacing. Rapid fire becomes available a lot sooner these days, and you really want to have something that kind of catches your eye. I had to set up a tell me when for it, so it would flash at me, because missing hitting that when it becomes available means that that cooldown is not going to be, coming available even sooner or later.
Right, and I mean the normal cooldown on that is 3 minutes, and it used to be prior to this tier that you'd almost want to try and use that. At least I was trying to use it in conjunction with Stampede, and I don't think that's that. Well, obviously, with the new mechanics and things, it's not necessary to do that. But that was sort of a thing where you could almost macro those two together, so you'd have your rapid fire and your Stampede going off at the same time. But that they're completely decoupled at this point, I would imagine.
Yeah, now survival and marksman, they can do rapid fire ridiculous amount of time, especially if they're end up spamming their arcane shots, or if they've got a heavy multi-shot ad phase or something like that. It's just I put together a need to know bar that just displays what the cooldown is for rapid fire, and went out to some target dummies, and I was just hitting my arcane shot, and a few arcane shots and a few cobra shots or steady shots, and when you're doing this with Thrill of the Hunt, which makes those arcane shots really, really cheap, it's quite impressive, especially with rapid fire. You can have Thrill of the Hunt up almost probably 90% of the time, and that rapid fire becomes available really fast. It's quite scary. So it's not exactly a chain gun type of thing. You still absolutely want to do the signature shots, no matter what specialization you are, because those really do hit harder and harder these days. But rapid fire is amazing. The other thing that goes into this is if you do have that assurance of consequence trinket, the cooldown on many important abilities is drastically reduced. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, you're right, and I think the way that trinket works, I'm going to look this up right now. That cooldown is varies depending on the level of your trinket too.
Yes,
by the
it
way.
does.
So the minimum with the raid finder, which is item level 528, it says increases the cooldown recovery rate of your 6 major abilities by 31%.
Mm-hmm.
So if you upgrade that 2 levels, it goes up a couple of percent, 33%. So each tier or each item level of so the flex rate is going to be even more than 33%. Normal is going to be more in Warforged and Heroic on up. So I think the max you can get it up to the best version of that will reduce the cooldown by like 47%, almost 50%. I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So mine is upgraded normal, and so it's I'm level 561, and I believe, if memory serves, the website isn't actually showing it right. It's 43% reduction. So Bestial Wrath, it's almost twice as fast. It's pretty amazing.
That is amazing, because Bestial Wrath has a pretty short cooldown. That's a 1-minute cooldown right now. So now you're talking about about a little over 30 seconds, I guess. Yeah. Somewhere between 30 and 35 seconds, maybe something like that. So that's pretty nice. That's crazy.
Yeah. So I guess the only thing that I would say about this is you definitely want to give, if you've got your 2-piece tier 16, LFR, Flex, Normal, whatever, definitely give Thrill of the Hunt a try, especially on any things that where you could be doing multi-shots a lot. It's quite amazing. Even in just single target DPS, it can be quite awesome. We just took down Thok, the Bloodthirsty, which is the big dinosaur that chomps you if he gets close to you. And he's got an ability which basically interrupts things. It's terrible for non-hunters. Hunters are pretty much fine, but being able to do arcane shots is pretty fun there, because instants are just great.
Yeah, and like I said, so Thrill of the Hunt is one that it's in the same tier as let's see, Lynx Rush and a Murder of Crows. So for the most part in this expansion, we've kind of ignored it a little bit.
Thrill the Hunts would usually be competing against Dire Beast.
I'm sorry, Dire Beast. Ugh.
Yeah. Which is a great ability. And I would say, unless you're doing multi-shots and unless you've got the tier 16, Dire Beast is the way to go. But
that's right. It's Fervor, Dire Beast, and Thrill of the Hunt. That's the tier we're talking about.
Yeah.
Which, of course, makes sense because you have Blink Strikes in the tier below. So there's, as far as we talk about button bloat and things like that, Thrill of the Hunt is a way to deal with that a little bit, and so is Blink Strike. So having those on separate tiers makes sense.
Yeah, actually, regarding button bloat, Thrill the Hunt certainly reduces one of the things, and when you've got Blink Strikes reducing another thing, I actually have a lot of holes in my primary buttons. Generally speaking, for fights, I switch talents out almost every fight. I'm getting a little bit of a kind of standard type of talent thing, but for the most part, on each boss, you want to look at the talents and evaluate if you should be changing something up.
Now, are you strictly going BM, or are you also switching to, say, survival for any fight?
Yeah, I gave survival a few shots. I thought that the what was it? Probably gonna butcher the name as well. Galacrus, the one with the towers and all the ads. I did survival with him, and I think we got our first normal kill when I was survival. But I've done BM on that and had no problem with doing a lot better damage.
Yeah, and
Beast Cleave is really pretty sweet.
Yeah, Beast Cleave was buffed, so BM AoE isn't bad at all. It's actually been pretty good. I mean, the idea is it's probably not as strong as the Serpent spread with multi-shot, but it's not bad. And I mean, in the fight you were just talking about, that's one that's just basically all ads. There's a sort of like a part where everyone just sort of stacks up kind of on the ground there, and you just start beating on waves and waves of ads, and then you usually have a group that goes up to, there's these towers, and you go and you basically take out one of the towers, and even there you're still dealing with multiple ads if you're on the tower team. I mean, and it's not like completely single target there either. So, but I think, as you said, BM on that fight is probably fine. But I can understand why you'd want to give SV a look, because it is a pretty heavy AoE fight for the most part.
Yeah, maybe it's just the way that I play, because I've become a little bit more accustomed to BM. I switch around no matter whatever is giving the highest DPS. But for the most part, I'm just playing Beastmaster better these days. That I can do a lot better damage on almost every fight with Beastmaster. Zero Miss in the chat forums brings up a really good point. That Zero Miss says, I hate using a Murder of Crows without fervor. And a Murder of Crows, when I take that talent, and I do like taking that talent, but I will always be focus depleted, and I won't be able to hit that when it's on cooldown, or off cooldown rather. Yeah,
that's a tough one. And obviously using it as BM can help, especially if you can line it up with Bestial Wrath to fire it when it's there, because you'll get the focus cost reduction, which is huge. But other than that, the focus cost on that is like 60 focus. I mean, it's pretty much that's you almost have to have a full focus bar to feel comfortable using that. Otherwise, you're going to just either not have enough to use it, or like you said, you're just going to strip out all your focus for that one ability.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. But it's a wonderful thing to have. It's one of the fire and forget type of things. If you're doing a boss and you got to do some ads or moving around a lot, it's a nice one to have.
Yep, and again, that competes with in Blink Strikes. I think Lynx Rush is the one that I know it got buffed a little bit, but it just seems to be, left alone. I mean, it just seems subpar compared to, say, Blink Strikes, which it just happens. You don't have to even really think about that. versus a Murder of a Crows, which is for a good single target. Ability is nice. Like I said, it's just a nice. It's got a fairly longish cooldown, but you'll get to use it multiple times during a fight, and it's just like an easy thing to say click on a boss. Even in a multi-ad fight, you can just still target your boss and do some damage on him while you take care of other things.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, regarding the Siege of Orgrimmar, it's kind of funny how sometimes you type things and you never say them out loud. So the bosses, as I was saying, there are a lot of talents I swap in and out. I will usually keep Binding Shot for almost all fights. There are some occasions where Intimidation might be useful. On Galacrus, you can use that on the ads that will attack our wonderful NPCs that we need to keep alive.
Yeah.
But Binding Shot will also work on some of the ads to keep them, in the blizzard. Post haste is great, and actually on that particular fight, I love taking post haste because I'm usually in the tower group.
Yeah, as am I. Yeah.
Running up that tower, doing a little misdirect on your tank. You're usually headed of the tank by a lot, which can be challenging. But also, when you're done clearing the top, I always volunteer for manning the big gun and taking down the big dragons, because that's just kind of fun, huntery type of thing too. But jumping off that tower and doing a disengage and having that post haste to get you exactly where you need to be is pretty crucial too.
Yeah, I agree, and I definitely use the disengage while jumping off the tower, and that's a great thing. You just jump off the tower, hit disengage, before you hit the ground, and you don't take many damage or very little, and it's a nice ability to have there. So if you happen to do Galacrus and be on the tower doing tower duty, yeah, you definitely want to keep disengage at the ready for that. Like I said, the speed boost from post haste is just nice, and we also have the glyph that can get you a little bit of 5% healing by using disengage as well. So there's lots of benefits now for that ability.
Yeah, you certainly want. I generally don't change any of my glyphs, and that's certainly one you take. I also certainly take the one that improves deterrence to bring up the defense for things that it doesn't just completely eliminate, but so that brings up to a 50% reduction in damage. Those are two really key ones.
Yeah, and I think the other one is the Spirit Bond. I forget the name of the glyph, but anyway, you get increased healing by having your pet out through the Spirit Bond. Yeah, I think those are the standard, certainly raiding glyphs. Like I said, I keep those the same for when I'm raiding. But it's when I'm out doing stuff on my own that I tend to swap some things out just to make the killing things with the pet a little bit easier, make it a little bit pet focused. But yeah, I agree that there's. But talents is another story. Like I say, you're definitely going through those tomes to swap things in out. I'm keeping stacks and stacks of those with me every time I go into a raid. For sure.
Yeah, I used to always have take the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Chimera, because it reduced the cooldowns of deterrence by so much. But that post haste is really fun. And I love, probably one of the best things in 5.4, and it seems so trivial, but being able to disengage while not in combat is just, we've said it before, I've heard you guys say it before too. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, it is fun.
Post haste, you're running straight, you do a quick pivot with your mouse, hit disengage, and then, you're much further on. It's almost like Blink, and plus with post haste, you got a speed boost at the end. It's just enjoyable.
Yeah, we can talk about a few more of these encounters. Like I said, I'm pretty much doing LFR. LFR doesn't count for anything. And I can't wait till I get the few items that I need out of there that I don't get, or I get them from Flex, because the Flex is fun. I enjoy the Flex. It's a lot more casual, but you have to pay. I like it because you have to pay attention to the mechanics. You can't ignore anything there, but it's a little bit easier to get through. It's a nice way it's a much better way to see the content, get some fairly decent gear, without banging your head. I mean, we did. Who was it? The new wing opened up this past week. Thok the Bloodthirsty. I went in with our group and we just got him in one kill. It took like half a dozen tries for the Spoils of Pandaria, but we got Thok on one try. But that's another story altogether.
I totally agree. We do less raiding flex, but we do flex and we bring along anybody and everybody, and it's just a good time. It's also especially nice that you can bring some people that will stand in stuff and die, and you can still finish the encounters, and nobody feels particularly bad. So that's kind of nice. And it's an interesting thing for the raid leaders to kind of balance out. Okay, how many healers should we have? That's actually one other thing that's kind of interesting, and even with doing normal, we've been doing some encounters with 4 healers. We've been doing some encounters with 3 tanks. You can do kind of odd things. It's not just the standard 2 tanks, tank swaps, 2 to 3 healers, and the rest DPS.
Yeah. I will say this, though. If you do general Nazgrim, you need at least 2 tanks for that. We went into the first week of Flex, and we had a tank leave, and that was the only fight we had left, and we tried to do it with 1 tank, and that does not work.
Yeah, we haven't had a 1 tank things, although we don't have a paladin tank. You could do a lot of things in Throne of Thunder with a paladin tank, solo paladin tank.
Yeah, with Nazgrim, we were doing it, and we had the 1 tank, and we just kept getting, I forget what the official name of those blades are, but the spinning blades, and we just kept getting one after the other, so the whole room was filled, and we thought, oh, that must be bugged. And then we realized that the actions the tank was doing was just basically building up that that rage, and it was awful. So that's when we discovered that, no, you actually have to have 2 tanks doing whatever swapping things that it is that the tanks do, and then you're good to go. But I noticed for that, when you made a note and we'll just hop around from one boss to the other here, General Nazgrim, you had mentioned using your flare on that particular fight was a good thing to do?
Yeah, so that one has the assassins, right? And flare is not a hunter ability that gets used that often in PvE. In PvP, it probably is on everybody's bar. But in PvE, generally you don't have a use for it. Well, assassins, you're going to have one person in your group targeted by assassin. It's great to just toss a flare on them, or toss a flare out where you think the assassins might be spawning from, because then it'll show them up and people can start damaging them. If the assassin gets really close to his victim before the victim kind of reacts, or maybe has their back to the assassin, then it's game over for that as I say, victim. Talents are general. I do take blink strikes a lot, and that's a very ad heavy fight, and blink strikes getting that pet there, regardless of your spec, I think is really important. Because you need to take down those healers really fast, and engaging them right away is important for that. Also, concussion shot is pretty nice there, as is scatter shot. To stop them from getting anywhere near the boss.
Yeah, those are 2 abilities that people tend to forget, and because basically they don't do anything on bosses generally, but on those fights with the ads, yes, I agree. Concussive shot and scatter shot are 2 things that you can do to kind of buy yourself some time, get a little bit of stun, slow ads down. Those are some nice utility, and I think the problem with abilities like that is that we don't really use them very often. They're very situational in PvE, and you can sometimes forget that you have them, or forget that they exist and don't always find uses for them, or you end up putting them on your toolbars for future use, and then they just kind of take up this space in key binding, and it's kind of annoying, and you never use them. At least I find that to be be the case for me. But I agree that but concussive shot is something I do use quite a lot. I probably don't use scatter shot as much as I should, only because I tend to think of it more as a PvP ability. But yes, it could be used for those ads and things in PvE.
Yeah, I actually have it. I've got my concussion shot as the first thing, and then I have scatter shot. It's one macro, and so I can concussion shot somebody, and if I want to hit it again, then it does a scatter shot. I've got scatter shot separate as well, but it's a key, an actual mouse click type of thing, and I generally only do that as kind of an interrupt substitute. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, that fight, for people that do PvP, I think they'd be pretty well suited to it. You don't want to have your back to things. You need to slow things. On ads and flares and traps and the whole 9 yards. It's pretty good.
Yeah, encounter shot's another one too. Even on General Nazgrim, I find that I'll have it just at the ready, and if I see like a war shaman or whatever casting something, I'll just try and get the interrupt off. So that is something that all hunters now we now have an interrupt that is baseline, and there are opportunities to use it.
Yeah, I'm so happy we have that as baseline. And I said last time, but I got the add-on that announces when my interrupts were successful. It's kind of a point of pride being able to get those down.
Yes.
So, what other bosses are interesting?
Like I said, I've only done these in Flex at this point, but I've done up through Thok, Malkarak. I like that fight. That was like a nice. I don't know how it is in normal, but that seems like that was a pretty easy fight to learn. In Flex, it's pretty much a single target fight, as you noted there, with just paying attention to a very few simple mechanics, and as long as you move to the right places and do the right things, you can get through that pretty easily.
So, yes, it's a pretty simple fight on normal. We had our raid team is pretty good and pretty consistent attendees, which is nice. And we rated my time zone 9 to midnight, and we killed General Nazgrim for the first time, and then we had 20 minutes left to raid, and there's a lot of trash, and so we sent our raid leader started watching a video, or found some videos while we cleared the trash, and none of us, we didn't actually think we were going to be getting that far, and so none of us were prepared. He watches the video. We clear the trash. We summon him. We've got 10 minutes left, and we get him on our second kill. It's a pretty easy fight to explain, and we're already used to being able to set raid markers during fights because of Throne of Thunder boss. I forget his name. The one that you had to do the spirals through and reveal the hidden bosses or hidden mini bosses, but yeah, that's a pretty easy boss to do. Pretty simple mechanics too.
Yeah, I mean it's just like the only thing we're very predisposed to not standing in void zones and things, and this is one where he puts a little sort of void zone on the ground, and you have to go stand in it. and other than that, like other people said, it's just he does this sort of conal smash ability, and as long as you know where he's going to put that, you just stand away, stay out of it, and then just DPS to your heart's content. And so, which I think is fine. I think it's okay for them to have an easy fight like that. Kind of in the middle, there's sort of like I think the expectation is that the bosses start out easy and then they ramp up in difficulty, but it's kind of nice to have a little bit of a break in the middle there and then have.
Yeah, he's an intermission. Yeah, I actually like the progression of the bosses a lot better in Siege than in Throne of Thunder. Throne of Thunder, the Horadon was pretty horrible to begin with.
That was an awful second boss.
Man.
That was just like, for 10 man, that was just a horrible second. That destroyed us, basically. That pretty much just killed our group.
You also had to have a pretty nicely balanced group as far as classes go.
Yeah,
if you
so-
didn't have a paladin, or if you just didn't have the ability to cleanse one of the doors, and you didn't even have anybody, didn't have a resto druid to be able to symbiosis somebody, or there were so many conditions where you're pretty much screwed because you can't completely destroy it because of your gear.
that was Horadin was like that for us. I mean, we had like 2 hunters. We had like we had like that. I said
It seems like they nerfed it like 3 different times until it felt right.
Yeah, I mean, at one point
by
we had
that
2
time-
hunters, 2 warlocks, 2 DKs. It was like Noah's Ark of raid composition. It was just two of everything, and it was a 10-man, which so it wasn't ideal at all. I mean, so yeah, but there's no, as far as I can tell, there hasn't been a new Horadon, at least not so early on in the instance.
Spoils is interesting for balancing because you really need to use your cooldowns at the right time, so you don't pop things right at the beginning. There's nothing to really do there, but you have to distribute your groups, and that's another really good opportunity for hunters to bring the right pet, because most likely you're not going to have the right debuffs or the right buffs just in a 5-man essentially. Stuff can stay. If you get might cast by a paladin, that stays with everybody. But for instance, heroism, it does not go across the
Right. So you want to
groups.
have exactly. You want to have one heroism in each group in order to take advantage of it. But yeah, that's a little interesting fight. That sort of brings in bits and pieces from several raid encounters that we've seen throughout this expansion. It's sort of like a giant ad fight. I don't know how else to describe it. You're just constantly DPSing little things here and there, and you've got to get them down quickly. And I don't know. It's not my favorite. I've only seen it one time now, but I don't know that it's my. I imagine that's one that'll become easier once you're used to it, and it'll become rather routine and almost boring. But it was one that gave us a little bit of trouble this past week.
It's certainly not one of the easiest ones. It's also just I don't know why there are these ads stored in these boxes that immediately come at you when you destroy the box. Then again, I can't explain why there's a dinosaur just sitting in a room. But
that's an interesting fight. That's not a bad fight for hunters. I mean, a lot of it's one that I think certainly favors range. I like being ranged on that fight.
Yes. That's not a fight to bring a lot of melee to. That's another great fight to have your post hates, and it's also another great fight to have blink strikes, because you can keep your pet going like crazy on them. One other thing I wanted to mention that came up in Twitter, and that was on the general. When the general is in defensive stance, you do not hit him. You do not attack him.
Right.
Anytime you do attack him, he gets rage, and when you get too much rage, then he's going to blow even a more damaging ability at you. But your pets do not count.
That's right.
And kill command, if you're Beastmaster, does not count. So you can just have your back turn to the general and just hit kill command on cooldown when he's in defensive stance.
Now, I did not know. I knew that about the pets because that came up during a raid that the pets would not trigger that. I did not realize that about kill command. Although that makes sense because it is technically a pet ability versus a hunter ability. So that's good to know. So you could still pop, I guess, Bestial Wrath and to some degree. And I don't know if you'd want to waste it on that phase, but you could do that and take advantage of the high damaging kill commands there. So that's good to know.
So if there are fights where you just love being survival, but you also have Beastmaster as a secondary, that's not a bad one to do it because of that reason. Because if you're cleaning up the ads fast enough, then you're just kind of standing around for the most part, and that's pretty nice.
Yeah, and that's good too. And then you don't have to really. I like the fact that you don't have to really manage your pet and think to pull them off there and remember to stick them back on and do all that. You can just let them beat on the boss for a little bit during those phases.
Oh, one other pet-related thing as far as boss tips go. On the Dark Shaman, having blink strikes is probably not a great idea because your pet gets around a little too fast, I think. I was always having my pet die all the time. I was rezzing my pet 3 or 4 times per fight or per attempt.
Now, was it just getting hit? Was it standing and stuff? Like hitting?
It was standing and stuff, and you really need to be watching out where your pet is. The other things, on that fight, you really want to have a special macro for targeting the slimes. But keeping that pet alive is really important on that fight.
Yeah, and just to sort of like the way that fight works, one of the things it does is puts like some green stuff on the ground. They do call up some little ooze type ads, and then the other thing is this ashen wall, which is like these, I don't know, golems or something. They just form this big wall of fire, which you do not want to go near or touch, basically. I thought you could, I don't know if you can deterrence and disengage through them. I thought I heard you could do something like that might work.
You can disengage through them. You can blink through them, which is generally the same thing, heroic leap, etc. But yeah, it was generally the wall that was killing him. So blink strikes just kind of makes it so you don't necessarily know exactly where your pet is all the time, or it's a lot harder to know exactly where your pet is. I just found I had better pet survivability when I took out that ability, and it's also a great thing to have Murder of Crows on anyway, because generally you're DPSing. You want to throw Murder Crows on the boss and then deal with the slimes or that type of thing.
Yeah,
anyway.
And that's one where you have 2 bosses, and they do the shared health pool thing, so you can just sort of focus on one that's convenient for you based on your positioning and things like that. But again, being ranged there, you can kind of avoid a lot of trouble too by staying at a distance. You can, which is one of the things I just love about being a hunter and just ranged DPS in general. You can kind of get that sort of further out view, and it's a nice way to avoid stuff. You can also get out of range of your healers, which is not ideal too, but I'll take the trade-offs.
So Arth had a good link to a post. It was many posts ago, but on MMO Champion, there's a thread that discusses all about where you can use deterrence, what it will block. For most cases, it's a little advanced use, which maybe only matters in heroics. But some of them are very easy to use. On that first boss, you can deterrence when he's doing his water spout ability. There's all sorts of, pretty much every single boss, there's some use of deterrence. So if that's a good spell for you, there's a thread, and you can find it on the Warcraft Hunters Union site.
Yep, and also check out Bendek's first scattered shots column, which goes through, I think, the first 8 bosses in Siege of Orgrimmar, and gives you some good hunter tips as well. Lots of good advice there. So if you haven't seen that or read that, go ahead. I encourage you to do that, because there's a lot of good information there. But yeah, one of the things you'll see about all these fights is deterrence is a useful ability. And we talked about this blue post a little bit last week, but I know you've had some back and forth with Ghostcrawl a little bit on Twitter, at least a couple exchanges, and had some thoughts. So why don't we go over it again, and because I'd like to hear your thoughts on the old deterrence, readiness deterrence, versus the new deterrence, which is the 3-minute cooldown and the 2 charges, and how they differ in the impact of that as we are now in 5.4 here.
Well, so there are a lot of clever uses for deterrence, and generally when somebody uses deterrence, they're using deterrence for a second or two. Unless there's like this massive amount of damage and there's nothing to DPS. So you generally deterrence, you do something, you walk through something, you jump on a mine, you avoid some brief damage, and then you cancel it. It's very important to have a cancel macro for deterrence.
Right. I mean, because the effect lasts 5 seconds. But when you cancel it, though, that I believe that does that remove the damage sort of reduction ability at that point too? I think it removes everything.
It takes away the buff, so that would take away the damage reduction.
Just keep that in mind too. But obviously, you should only be canceling it when you no longer need the benefit of deterrence, essentially.
Right. So, back when 5.4 was still just on the PTR, it was the one reason I got on the PTR. I don't do PTRs to do the raid bosses and to get world first or anything like that. We're like ranked second on our server, and the ranked first guild is already doing heroics. But I got on the PTR to check out deterrence, and it is a really cool ability to have with the charges, but the charges again are kind of weird, right? And I don't think Blizzard really understood how they would be working, or they didn't. They made statements around how they expected it to work that didn't match up with how it is now. So after 3 minutes, if you use deterrence, use it again. After your third deterrence in 3 minutes, then you're going to have to wait either 2 minutes or 3 minutes for any deterrence to come up again. And it used to be that we had a cooldown of just 1 minute. And, I'm not crying about this, but it's not what they had stated it was going to be. They wanted to give deterrence a bit of a buff because they were taking away readiness. And one thing that you could do with readiness, at least in PvP, would be to be able to do deterrence, blow some DPS cooldowns. Oh, you're getting focused on again. You blow readiness, and then you've got deterrence again. So they kind of met that goal with the charges, but the cooldown they made it a minute longer, and it's not clear why. It makes a lot of sense if they thought charges, or whoever was doing the development thought charges charged independently. That would be awesome. That would make sense across the board. But yeah, you can be waiting a very long time if you use your deterrence early. So here's the tip: use your deterrence sparingly. Use it when you need it. There's lists of where you can use deterrence in these fights. You don't need to use it all those times. Use it when you need it. If your group is having difficulty with healing, yeah, you can use it to soak some damage or not take damage. But generally, you can just be a good range player and take the same sort of damage that other range players do.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean the big difference was I think you had sort of looked at on a long fight you probably have fewer opportunities to perhaps to use deterrence as you might have before, but there's certainly some benefits of having that sort of back-to-back or that control, I guess, if you will, of using your charges. I mean, it's definitely useful.
Yeah, I mean, in PvE, bosses generally do these abilities once every 30 seconds, once every minute, once every 2 minutes, some regular basis. And when deterrence had a cooldown of 1 minute, it lined up pretty nicely in a lot of things in Throne of Thunder. Now we kind of have, either a 2 minute or 3 minute cooldown, with one extra use thrown in there. So it's if you're using it on cooldown, which thankfully a lot of the bosses in here, you can use it pretty often, but you don't need to use it. There's not a desperate need to do that.
All right.
So.
All right. Well, we had one, if you remember, our Hunter Achievements of the Week. You found a pretty cool one and wanted to spend some time talking about that. So why don't we jump to that, and I'll have you go and let the folks know what you found or what someone did.
Yeah, so there's a pretty high achieving solo pet tanker named Durendil. He's in the EU. I think he's French. I think. He, I think he'd be great to get on the podcast, but I think there'd be language difficulties. But he completed the gold tanking achievement in the Proving Grounds. I've been following the Proving Grounds. I've been looking at. You can go WoW Progress and click on the tanking achievements, and then you can narrow it down to the class. Warlocks. There's maybe 9 warlocks that have been doing that have gold achievements, and there's 1 hunter now. And this guy Durendil has been soloing all sorts of raid bosses. He's made a name for himself, and he's got a YouTube channel where he's got these things. He does it primarily by having a really, really specific setup. He's got everything macroed in, and he does the pet misdirect on almost every ability. At least probably half of his abilities, he's probably got the pet misdirect macroed in. And he does a lot of things along the lines of, "Hey, my pet is going to die. I know it's going to die because I've wiped on this thing, 500 times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dismiss my pet right before he dies, and I'm going to summon a new one because I can't res one fast enough." But the Proving Grounds is one of the most amazing things for achievement here because your gear is scaled down. Generally speaking, things that we pet tank or solo pet tank, it's extreme soloing, we're doing it because we outgear the content dramatically.
Right. If you go into the BC raids and stuff like that now, you can just crush everything because we're just, like I said, so overpowered in our new gear that it's laughable.
But here, Durendil's and others have been really making strides of doing things where they're only maybe half a gear above the content, maybe 1 tier above the content. So it's the same release. They're doing stuff in mists, but their gear is 1 or 2 levels above it. But in Proving Grounds, all your gear is scaled down to crappy 463 level, and so you really have to know your stuff. And this guy does. He was using distracting shot on mobs, and his pet was picking stuff up like you wouldn't believe. There's a video of it. It's pretty impressive stuff.
That is pretty cool, and it's always fun to see hunters do these types of things with, like you say, current content and not old, washed out content. This is stuff that tanks who are tanking, Siege of Orgrimmar are going to be trying to do themselves. So this isn't, in here, like I said, we've got some warlocks and now a hunter who's successfully done the tanking achievement, the gold tanking achievement in the Proving Grounds, which is pretty cool because I'm sure there's some hunters that are probably still working their way through trying to get the gold in DPS, never mind tanking. So I think that's a pretty cool thing. Now if we can figure out some way to do Spirit Beasts and get the healing achievement, but I don't know that would. I don't think that's quite possible, but
I was going over my Spirit Beast macro, and it's a little tougher now because Dismiss Pet, instead of being 2 seconds before, now it's 3 seconds. It's challenged now. So I'd still love to have an all hunter raid. I think an all hunter flex raid would be awesome.
Yeah, that's a possibility now, isn't it? I mean, that would be kind of cool. I mean, you could kind of scale that. And, and the nice thing about that is, like I said, it's anywhere between 10 and 25, so you don't even have to. You can kind of go all points in between, so you don't have to have 10 or you got 15 people, 20 people. You're going, which is kind of nice. Which is what I love about Flex.
Yeah, you don't have to leave anybody behind.
Yeah, so I've got one email here, and so I'm going to try and squeeze that in, and it's a little bit related. It's actually related to pet tanking. This is someone named Nitin, and writes to us and said, he sent us one email saying that he was interested in soloing some dungeons, and I think sold one normal level Mists of Pandaria dungeon, which isn't that big a deal. Even I can do that, and that's saying a lot. I did that for that cooking quest. But he said, so yesterday I did all the heroic level 90 dungeons in Pandaria, and today I finished off Skoloman's Scarlet Halls and Scarlet Monastery. That's much more extreme. It says Radagor sucks solo, just saying. It said Spirit Beasts make awesome tank spec pets. This was a lot of fun, but subjectively still easier than challenge dungeons. Yeah, I would imagine that soloing a talent dungeon would be pretty well challenging. But anyway, so I guess this is someone who says he's been able to go in there and tried soloing the heroic level 90 dungeons and is able to do that. I don't know what kind of gear this person has. I assume it's some level of either Throne of Thunder or Siege of Orgrimmar gear.
It's probably a lot more than what your gear gets scaled down for challenge dungeons.
Yes. Yeah, so, which I'm not surprising. I actually ran a few 5-man dungeons last week, not by myself, but with 4 other DPS. We did them. We went through them as just 5 DPS and just crushed these things. I mean, it was nice. It was a great way to get some easy valor badges and things like that. It was just kind of fun to do, and there was very little risk of death. So I would say in the current gear, the level 90 heroic 5-man dungeons are pretty much a joke at this point. So it just shows you the gap between that sort of entry level gear, the 450 level blues, and the stuff we have now. That the amount of power that we get out of that gear has been tremendous. So, grats to Durendil and grats to Knitten, and I'd love to hear about some of your other hunters out there who are soloing stuff. But like I said, I imagine, especially with the new expansion on the horizon, once we get into that, we'll see people going back and doing all of these kinds of dungeons and things like that. So
yeah,
cool.
I'm looking forward to that.
So
I always like the solo stuff. It's always interesting to me.
It is neat to see, especially like I said with stuff that Durendil's doing, where it's current content, and even more impressive, like we said, without the benefit of buffed gear. So that's cool.
Soloing stuff certainly brings out all of the things you need to know about an encounter. Generally, hunters don't have to know pretty much anything about what tanks are doing. But soloing, yeah, you gotta know it all.
It's also nice to be able to beat something that people will assure you that you cannot beat.
It's nice to have a challenge.
Yeah. So good stuff. Well, that's all the news and everything we have for today. So I think on that note, you have been listening to episode 189 of the Hunting Party Podcast. I'm Darkbrew from thebrewhall.com and the Brew Hall on Twitter.
And I'm Kheldul from Hunter DPS and Kheldul on Twitter.
And I'm Alexander from the Hunting Party Podcast.
Check us out on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or at our RSS feed to your reader. Links are available on the show notes. Also, if you like us, please don't be shy about leaving us a review on iTunes or leave a comment on YouTube, especially one where you ask how many spore bats you keep stable.
You can submit a title for this week's show by emailing us at huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com and have your name mangled on air by hunters.
All right, stay thirsty, my friends. Remember to drink your dark brew lager.
For the Horde!
Thanks for the invite, guys.
Well, you're welcome. That's not much of a... All right, we'll have to work on that.
I'm in the outro?
Have you back.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I put like a double question mark there. It's like for you to... I don't know. I had no idea what you'd come up to say, but that...
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
It's fine.
Well, you actually did the outro right.
I know.
Well, For the Alliance isn't taken.
Yeah.
Fuck by your command.
I can jump shot, BM, MM, and SB. I can rock out any tree. worried about my threat, 'cause I've got FD and misdirect. Catching loose mobs in my traps. I never miss, 'cause I am hit capped. 'Cause I'm the hunter, not the marked. I'm the fighter, not the spark. I'm the kiter, not the kite. I'll top the meters every fight. Rated and game dealing death. Just me, my gun, and my trusty bed. Now let's begin with Illidan, Osirian, and Gil'jadan, Magdamar, Asgalor, Gruul, Cthulhu, and Razorgore, Onyxia to Ragnaros. Which one have we killed the most? Kel'Thuzad to Malygos. We even killed the Kama's ghost. Feels like we're getting close, all that running as a ghost. Yogg-Saron, Therian, Sartharian, Megthuradon, Sapuron, Luciferon to Sulfuron,